Yeah, so the recording is started, everybody. Welcome at the Front-End Lightning Talks. We're already with some great people here, sitting at the table, having a nice evening, already chatted before. So it will be awesome. We have three people in the back moderating the session, cameras. So big shout out to them as well. Today we have a really awesome program for you, and it will be about innovation in the front end. So a very diverse program. We expect to do some remix and talk about interaction with VR. But before that, some general announcements. I already mentioned it, but please, questions in the chat. Those will be answered by the presenters in the end, and maybe even during the presentation, if that's possible. At the end, there will also be a possibility to unmute yourself and ask the questions directly in person. Again, the session will be recorded and posted on YouTube. It will also be posted on Meetup if you miss it. So hello to the viewers next week or something like that. Sad that you couldn't join. What we want to achieve with the Frontend Lightning Talks is some inspiration and an informal session with each other. So there will be some laughter today. There will be some inspirational talks and some information as well, of course. Well, today, who do we have at the table? On my left side, we have Pavlik from ING. He will present the first presentation. And on the right side, we have Daniel from Toasty. Wave to the camera, indeed. Hi, Mom. And I will be your host, Jen, for today. We all love front-end. We all love to do front-end. We all love to work with front-end at different clients. But what's Toasty? This will not be a recruitment talk because we are doing this as front-enders. And we love to share the knowledge and have some cool inspirational thoughts about it. So, a small thing about Toasty, it's a pretty big company. We are in the interaction community that has 80 front-enders and designers. So it's great to have some fun. When you have previously watched the Frontend Lightning Talks, you also know we like to do things with backend, the Java community. Backend X Frontend, for instance, you can watch that back in the YouTube link as well. That's posted, I think, somewhere in this chat today. And we also gladly like to collaborate with design because we want to do that and it inspires each other. Well, Toasty, it's a company who does lots of things from cloud till front end, till business analyst. Well, it does everything basically, but most importantly also for lots of clients. I myself, I've worked at Aegon and ING and still happy at ING. That's why I know Pavlik as well. But without further ado, let's go to the program timeline. We're doing a small introduction right now. Feel free to ask some questions in the chat, by the way. I would prefer that you grab a drink and sit back and relax and enjoy, of course. First, we're going to do Back to the Roots with Remix. Will be a very interesting presentation, around 20 minutes or so. And afterwards, we have no break this time. That's very important to know. So stretch your legs in between, I would say. Afterwards, some user interaction with VR. In the end, we'll be ending around 8 o'clock. It's not a strict deadline. We can chat afterwards. That's also possible. But then it will be the official ending. Well, without further ado, I would like to introduce Pavlik with Back to the Roots with Remix. I will give him the HDMI cable right now, so there will be a technical switch. So bear with us for a few seconds. And I would like everybody to use the reaction button and give a big applause to Pavlik. I will do it in here. Probably will sound terrible, but let's see. Let's go, Pavlik. Great, you can start. Everybody can see the screen.
Thank you very much. Thanks for inviting me. And it's going to be a talk Back to the Roots with Remix, with the theme innovation in the front end. And that sounds a little bit opposing, like because innovation applies some new things, while back to the roots means something like back to the history. But I will explain it in a second how it can be with Remix. So first of all, a couple of things about me. So I'm Pavlik.
Small break. I think the sharing is paused. Yeah. I noticed. Oh, right. So if you can share again, that would be nice. As you can see, we're doing this for like the 6th time already, but still some technical demo gods are always there. So if you can share the full screen, that would be amazing. Then sharing will probably not be paused. Yeah. Yeah, now it's showing your full screen. It's working again, and I don't think it's paused, so we can go again.
Yes.
Thank you for waiting. Continue, Pavlik.
Yeah. So a couple of things about me. I'm Pavlik, working at ING together with Christine, creating in a different team though, and that's what I'm doing during the day and during the night. Sometimes evenings, I run a small like development agency, codebuild.agency. So Remix. This is actually not a picture. This is a framework, your old framework, but that in this way the text will be really nice. And their landing page, their documentation says that the Remix framework focused on the web standards and the modern web app UX, and we are simply going to build a better websites. So that sounds like a fancy statement, quite bold, and I would like to check whether it's true, and together with you check those statements in the remix. How true are they? So in the very beginning, to set a little bit the stage, so that's the picture that I found somewhere that is not really visible, but I can elaborate what's like going on this picture. So the first column is like server rendering, and then it goes from left to the right, how much server is involved in the rendering of the application, of our code base that we serve to the client. So this server rendering, the application like input is navigation-based, navigation requests. So in your browser, you have a navigation line bar, and there you put the URL, and then the server responds to this URL with the full HTML of the resulting application. So then it goes the less and less and less server, and in the very, very end, browser just served, or the server served like a couple of scripts, and there like the script stacks and the style stacks, and everything else happens on the client side. So that's the full client side rendered application. So we have something in the middle, SSR, for example, with rehydration. Next.js is very good and famous example of this, when you have server-side rendered code with that later rehydrated on the client, and then the client can interact with this code as the full client-side application. So let's find out where is Remix in all this, in this like rendering approaches ingredient. So for this, we're going to take a look at some application that I like test application that I built with the Remix, and we will see what Remix actually does. So this is the application. So that like the content of the application is not really important. Like the most important part is just like it has a list on the left, and then when we click on some item in this list, it shows the details of this item. So there is like a movies list and the details of this movie. It has like some reviews. So far so good. So if we clear our network requests and refresh the page, so you can see a bunch of JavaScripts here. And if we switch to a different page, we still can see like those JavaScripts. So basically, like this application, like all the requests has some more information, some more data. Code. So essentially, the closest will be the Next.js approach, where it like server-side rendered with the rehydration on the client. However, and here is the catch here. So we can comment out one line in the code base. This line is just like to load the scripts. And then we will refresh the page. We will clear our network request, and we see exactly the same application. So, but if we now filter out by the JavaScript, we don't see any JavaScript requests. So we can switch the pages, it still loads the data, and it doesn't have any JavaScript. So that means that the Remix rendering, like Remix actually has two different rendering approaches. The first one is the server-side rendered with client-side hydration or rehydration sometimes. And the second one is the pure server-side rendering. Like in the old days when it's like PHP or Java on some other applications, server-side, like full server-side applications, Ruby, my favorite example. There we had only server-side rendered code, and this code was based entirely on the navigation like on our in our browser. So that's good. However, how does Remix support these two different approaches? Like, because they're quite different. And for this, we will take a look at another Remix code base. So basically, like we are going from the bottom to the top, and we will have like a code samples of the tutorial of the Remix application. So this is a blog tutorial, like it's like open source, available for everyone just to study Remix. And we will see from there how does it support two different strategies.
Pavlik, could you maybe elaborate a bit more about what Remix exactly is? Because there's a question in the chat.
Yeah.
The framework.
Yeah. So Remix is the full stack framework that like helps to build like client-side applications or just regular applications. So this is a full stack framework based on the React and TypeScript usually, and because it's a full stack framework, so you have like a server, and the server like serves the application, like it has some connectors to the database. So essentially a framework to build an application.
No, I hope it answers your question there. Friendly Tiger. Thank you, continue. Yeah.
Yes. So the code samples from this, let's take a look at them. Here is just like slightly adapted code. There's not much happens here. So we can see in the very top, it has a couple of imports from Remix Run Node and import from Remix Run React. And that's already a little bit interesting because Node is executed on the server level, while React is executed on the client level. So one file essentially contains something that is like executed on the both platforms. So then we have a couple of lines to actually work with the database. These quite simple lines. We just like get we have a line, we have a function get posts that retrieve the posts from the database, and then we have a loader function that serves those posts as the JSON. And the last part of this file is the React component, where we have just a simple component. In the very first line on this component, we load the data from the database or like from our API, and then we render some list of posts with the post title and the link to admin panel. So here we have the combination of the client-side code and the server-side code, and essentially that's quite difficult to execute in any one given platform. So how does Remix do this?
Because of the power of Remix, I guess.
Yeah, and the magic is actually quite simple. Remix does not execute the code that we wrote. Remix does building before the execution. So it splits the code that we wrote into two parts. So some like it actually just analyzes the code and extracts some like parts of this code and put it to the resultant file to the config that is essentially served to Express server. So this config, for example, in our file, we had a like loader function. We have a loader function that loads something from the database, and we have a component. So Remix during the build stage will extract the loader function and put it to the loader key in an object, and then a component, it will extract it and put it to the component key. So to prove this, that's just a little bit cryptic code of the Remix after it gets built. But here you can see from line 3 to line 6. So here it indeed exports default key, and that returns the component posts. And the loader for this is the loader function, and the loader function is exactly the same. So it's just like JSON representation with the posts key, where the post is something that is taken from the server. Here our post function that has like a built React component, and here is like exactly the same React component with the main tag, like posts, post text, and then the list with the list of posts inside. So here, this line, this like file that we had before, that was only to retrieve data from the server. However, the question how to update the data, because if we imagine that there is no JavaScript served to the client, then we still want to send something like from the client side, from the browser to the server, and like to modify the data. So for this, Remix has like traditional way, like how the people worked with those things in the Ruby on Rails applications, Java applications, and so on. And it's a form. So here, for example, we have a new component called the component, React component. And here on line 23, we have a form component, which is a nice wrapper by Remix that wraps the native form element, but also on top of it, it wraps some API requests, AJAX requests, in case we do have a support for JavaScript. So when this script stack is enabled, it wraps the form and does everything client side. So here, the action for for this component, when the form is submitted, this action is executed. And because natively form is submitted with form data, not JSON, here on the line 8, we can see that to get the data that was sent, we use the form data function from the request. Then we get the title, assuming there is a title, and then we create this post in the server. So very similar like to the traditional approach, with the only exception is that we use the form data and the form element in the component itself. So the Remix routing, it's also quite an interesting thing here. So it's file-based, exactly as Next.js. So we can have like variables here, like as post ID. We can have nested routes. We can have splat routes that catches everything. A lot of nice things like optional segments and so on and so on. The most important thing though is a layout. And the layout is something like that Remix introduced, and the authors of Remix are authors of Remix React router. So they're the same people. So, and why is the layout is important? So assuming we have a regular component. So let's say we have like an admin panel back office where we have a list of invoices. So we have a sales component there that loads list of invoices. Then we can select one invoice and then it shows the details of these invoices. So pretty traditional component, pretty traditional nested components. The problem with this approach is that if in the invoices component, we need to load the invoices first, the list of the invoices, and then to render like everything as, for example, written here. So unless invoices are loaded, then we do not render anything. And once the invoices are loaded, we render everything, including the invoice component. Then we have kind of a water flow problem. Then, oh, that's interesting. The water flow problem is that first it loads the data for the first component, that it renders this component of subcomponents, and then it starts loading the data for the subcomponents. So essentially, we will have like steps where the data is loaded first for the high-level components and subsequently for the lower-level components.
In theory, you could get like 7 spinners.
Yeah. The worst case, you will have a lot of spinners. Yes. And the trick here is to actually load the data independently. So, and that's how the Remix approached it as well. So because they support full server-side rendering and the data is passed fully through the navigation request, so they already see from the navigation request what components are going to be loaded, to rendered. Because Remix did a pre-build step and it separated loading the data and the rendering of the components, it also can understand what data will be needed for those components. So Remix can start in the very beginning, right after it receives the request, to load all the data for the components and then render the components at once. So this approach has like some benefits. It also has some downsides, because if you have a water flow and let's say the first request and the second request, they took like milliseconds, couple of milliseconds, then you at least render something on your screen. If while in here with the Remix approach, you will wait for all requests first to load, to complete, unless you can render something. And if one of the requests, like something goes wrong and it's stuck and it takes like 5 seconds to load this request, it can be that the customer will wait for 5 seconds and they will not see anything. So by default, if everything goes well, that works really nice. And indeed, that can improve the UX of the customers. In the worst case scenario, that can be very not nice for the customers.
Have you looked with a designer at this sometime, or maybe designers have opinions on it, of course?
Yeah.
But I don't know if you've proposed this to the designer saying, hey, this could happen in that case. Yeah.
Well, that can happen.
No.
Yeah, but I'm a positive guy.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just assume it does not happen.
Yeah, sure. Hope for the best. Nice. So.
All right. Yeah, jokes aside, like, so there are some other features in the remix. And of course, because I missed this part, but I didn't recover it, like the remix is the full stack framework, and it supports like all the full stack features which are like required nowadays to building a full stack application, which is authentication. It also has some benefits, some tags for SEO to improve like the results for being in the search, and also it has error boundaries. And error boundaries exactly for such cases when you have simultaneously several like APIs and several components, and one of the component actually got broken in the chain. And then you like discover this, but you don't want to break the whole page. You just want to break this island with the component. And for this, it Remix introduced some nice feature, which is error boundaries. So let's take a look at the promises from the Remix and whether they're fulfilled. So the web standards. Indeed, like Remix uses the native browser navigation to get the resources, like everything is kept in the browser state. So it uses the native form to actually modify the data. So it's like it uses some standards. Of course, there's like more standards that can be used. Web components, we use a lot of web components and like ING, for example, and those are different web standards. But Remix uses some standards, and it is based, like main ideas of the Remix are based on the web standards. Modern web UX. So kind of, so it is modern and it does provide some beneficial like benefits for the customer. So you can also do the optimistic updates and other things for them. For your UX, especially if you have JavaScript enabled. So I would say it's quite modern. Like, so it's definitely like not the old ages when there is like a full page every time.
Not back to the roots.
Yeah, not entirely back to the very roots. Yeah. And the better websites, yeah, like from this, like because it's a modern UX and it's indeed like the quality can be better for customers, especially because by default it is better. So you don't need to do any tweaks, any like improvements. You just follow what Remix proposes you, and it's like it already a good result. So I would say it are better websites, and by default, like the UX is okay, is good. How to start? So if we like learn something about Remix, want like to start about it, so the best way to start is obviously the documentation of the Remix, because they have like really solid tutorials, like impressive, like where one is the blog one is quite small, Jokes Up is very big, so there you can learn a lot about Remix. Then there is like Vercel or other serverless tools that already supports the framework Remix, so it's quite easy to deploy like this application to production. And of course, you can write about this like LinkedIn, Medium, and any other platforms to give you visibility to share the experience about Remix. So that would be like really nice. And as the closing words, I would like to say that Remix is really cool, but be careful, like use it very wisely. And the thing for this is that even though there's like a web standards that Remix is going like to use, the standards are different. For example, in the React world, soon there will be probably a standard about like React server components. And React server components are not supported by Remix. And like Remix explicitly, they like consciously decided not to support it and decided to choose a different architecture with the solution to the water flow loading problem. But it's not what React team like put in bet on. For example, there's a Next.js framework, and they have native support for the React server components. So maybe in the long run, like from this perspective, Next.js will be better. Also, like I mentioned, that Remix has like this nice feature of layouts to actually split the components and the state loading. And Remix or Next.js stable version of Next.js doesn't have it, but Next.js beta does have it. Like there's a new like additions to the Next.js like app folder, and it has exactly the same like features as Remix does. So like that's Remix is really cool. Like I don't want to say anything like
you don't want to downgrade it.
yeah, definitely. Yeah. But it's just be conscious more with your choices when you're going to try it. And on this, I'm done.
Nice.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pavlik. Small clap from my side and also the reactors as well. Well done. Yeah, we have one question in the chat, and also I'm interested in one part as well. Unplugging the HDMI is a bit of a hassle. One question, because you said indeed the future of Remix is interesting. What do you think about the future of Remix in that case? Because from my personal side, I don't see it in production yet for big companies. What do you think?
I agree. I think it's indeed like this. So they're currently working on the version 2. There are a lot of breaking changes already. On top of this, so Remix were like authored by the two authors of the Remix of React router, but it got bought by Spotify. Or Shopify.
Yeah.
So now it belongs to a huge company. So maybe they have some opinions about how it should evolve, and maybe because it was like bought recently, so there are going to be some changes. So put it in like at that particular moment in production is a little bit too risky. Maybe it's like worse to wait maybe a year, maybe half of a year at least.
To see how it gets fixed up.
Yeah, and then it would be the perfect choice.
Yeah, so I see a question from yours. When is the advice to use? Wait a few years. Not yet. Maybe for your personal project, it's really nice to see the connection between the server and the front end as well, right? Then you can really see the benefits of it, but also maybe the downsides.
Yeah,
that's also interesting. And there's also one question: why should people use it compared to other libraries such as frameworks? Are there like competitors to Remix, or is it really a standalone part?
I think the closest competitor is Next.js, and it actually like Remix has indeed like already built-in solutions to improve like the UX. So you can like, and also it's a full stack framework, so you can easily build like small to medium-sized like applications with the Remix in a nice space and with the good quality. But maybe that is the only reason right now, just to try it out, just to enjoy the quality of the product by default with the fast pace. But on top of it, if you already have an experience with other frameworks and like Next.js, for example, and Next.js beta, I would not say there is like a clear winner in this.
There's not a clear winner in this case. Okay, nice. Well, thank you again for answering the questions as well. I think Remix is pretty interesting. It's cool to see like the different dynamics of it as well. And now we'll go to Daniel, so you can plug your HTML cable in right now.
My apologies.
No problem. You gave them a sneak preview, I think, right? Now they're all warmed up. So please, a big applause for Daniel. In this case, he's going to talk about user interaction with VR. So here you go, Daniel, and the stage is yours.
Yes, thank you. Everything. Yes, thank you very much. Is everything visible?
Yeah.
Properly? Nice. Well, thank you very much. So I'm here to talk about the user interaction with VR from the Lightning tool.
Whoa. Nice.
So this is me. I'm Daniel. I'm now working for 5 years at Society. I started here as a Microsoft backend developer. My background at school was in game development. I have worked at the GLS for a few months. I've worked at PostNL for a few years. Then I went to Capgemini. While I was at Capgemini, I went to KLM. Now I'm back at Society and I'm still at KLM. And what I'm doing at KLM is XR development. So we make different virtual reality applications, which are simulations for training purposes. I was asked for this talk about, well, it's the front-end Lightning talks. My background is mostly in backend and now in XR. So I looked up what front-end exactly means, but
It's about the innovation of the VR, of course, right?
No,
so
but
inside the
I
browser
was
as
really
well.
curious about what is then front-end. Front-end is everything that the user interacts with.
Yeah.
So I was thinking, yeah, with VR, you're in a virtual environment, and actually everything is what you interact with. You're in a virtual environment. It's like a game. In a game, you interact with the whole world, and even a small pebble in the corner of a room is part of your environment. I want to start the presentation by putting on my tin hat foil hat to talk about the metaverse very shortly. So the metaverse is very interesting. Most people probably already heard about it. The metaverse is like a very large multiplayer online gathering of people in virtual reality. There are many definitions, but this is the most used one. And a lot of big corporations are, well, I wouldn't say fighting, well, they are fighting for the race of the metaverse. So which platform will be the biggest one? And you can speculate about it, why it is like that. Microsoft has Mesh. Meta has, of course, Meta World Horizon. Why are they so much going into this metaverse? And it's because, well, these companies are mostly about data, of course. Until now, front end on your screen, you have, well, your mouse position. You have how someone browses, but that's about it. You can, of course, track them with cookies and different things. In VR, you have everything about someone. So you have how someone moves, what someone is looking at, what pulls his attention. And this is, of course, a very, well, with my tin foil hat, it can be scary, but it, of course, has also a lot of possibilities for us as front-end developers. So we can use all these inputs to create a very unique experience for the user. And one of those things is that there are many different ways of interacting with this world. So until now, games are a lot played with controllers. Now there is hand tracking, a lot of use of hand tracking with new headsets. There's even eye tracking in a lot of headsets now, so they can track what you're looking at, and this way you can optimize a lot of performance, but also change the experience based on what someone is looking at. And these are just the beginnings. In the future, of course, it can be anything. I'm not sure if it's going to be about brain scans. There's, of course, a lot of science fiction about putting things in your neck and then you are in the metaverse. You can, of course, fantasize all day about it. But what it's all about is it's very much, it's all front end, it's everything you interact with. Now, a lot of metaverse applications you see are based in an office environment, which of course sounds very weird because you are in this world where you can do anything. You can be in outer space, you can be in a mushroom kingdom, whatever. But still, many of the applications are rooted inside an office. And this is very much because it's something that we're familiar with. So familiar spaces are used very much to make the gap smaller to enter the metaverse in that way. It's mostly also for older generations. They do not like too space out experiences. So the office is a very controlled environment. So when we make our application, you of course start somewhere in the application. The first thing is that you need to take it very easy with a new user. Many people still haven't experienced VR. We make simulations for example, cabin crew at KLM, and not everyone is that experienced of a gamer. So when you put on a headset, you get a very mixed reaction from them. The first thing is that they're gone. Whatever you say to them, they won't even listen to you because they're in this new world. So you have to take it very easy in this new environment to get them used to it. Other things with getting in and out of VR is you need to build in a lot of pause moments. So the user needs to have its moments to put off the headset in case he gets sick, in case his eyes get tired. You have to build in manually a lot of these short pauses for him. But at the same time, if you have a loading screen, you need to do it as fast as possible because someone is stuck in VR. So usually when you have to wait on your game to load, you can look at your phone, you can check your WhatsApp messages, but in VR you're stuck. So keep the loading times very short. Now since, what is it now, 8 years, you can have mini games again in your loading screen. It was for a long time, there was a patent on it from 1995 until 2015. Bandai Namco had a patent on it for mini games in their loading screens. It's now past its due date, so now you can.
Yeah, but that's not a good user experience, right?
Well, if you have to really be for a long time in the loading screen, at least, a mini game doesn't have to be like a real game. It has to be an experience. You can just have something fly around for the user to look at. So once you're really in VR or in your application, what do you see? Well, UI. UI is, of course, very front end. And you need to incorporate this UI somewhere. You don't have a screen in VR, so you need to put it somewhere in your environment. So you can put it around in different places in the environment, but of course, the user needs to be able to call this UI. So there's a lot of possible ways. A lot is used that you're close to your hands. So you press a button close to your hands and you get a UI in front of you. Putting it around is also very used in games a lot. You see it on the images, that's that space, that the health bar is on the back. Another very fun example, maybe other people know, is Spyro, very first Spyro games. You have like a small dragonfly, and the dragonfly would be your HP in the game. So if you would get hit, your dragonfly changes color. But you don't, of course, always can afford that. So if you really need a UI in front of you, put it at least a meter away from you. Big and far away is always better than close and very small for readability. Now we have our UI, we are in VR. What's the next thing you start doing when you're in VR or in any game? You start moving. So how do we move in VR? Well, this is something that's, there's a lot of discussion on it always. You have a lot of different ways to move. You can, of course, just have analog sticks on your controllers. You can just simply move that forward. The user can get very sick if you start moving him from standing still to moving immediately. So the user always has to give an input to start moving. I know a lot of people that refuse to try VR because they used in the past, they did an application in the past, like a roller coaster, on the phone you put on your cardboard, and you have like a roller coaster and it goes very fast and it goes everywhere. They tried this 5 years ago, they didn't like it, they got sick, and now they don't want to try VR anymore. So that's also something that when you make a VR application, you also have to think in that sense. Not only are you showing them your application, but you're also a front for VR in its general way. You can always try to take it away, the motion sickness. What a lot of games do is that you have a circle around you when you start moving, so it fades away part of your screen. This helps pretty much, actually. A lot of games also have snapping, so if you snap your analog stick on your controller, the screen will snap immediately 45 degrees, 30 degrees. This can also help a lot with motion sickness. There are a lot of creative ways to move. I know there are games that you have to fake that you're running and then you start moving in the game. I have some videos about ways that we use at KLM. This one is made by an intern, which is a very simple way of grabbing something, so your UI close to you, and moving it somewhere to actually move in the environment. And I have another one, which is this is a walk around, so you can walk around the airplane and you can select different things. So this is made by one of our UX designer at KLM, and he made a really creative way of kind of like a game. You move your, I don't know what it's called in English, your peon around the board, and then you can teleport. And he also tried pointing and teleporting, which is something that is very discussed about in VR movement. But this one is it was received very well, and it also works really great.
Yeah, you see some patterns in websites as well, for instance, with the blinking, etc. You don't want that in websites, and you also don't want it in VR.
Yeah.
So I'm also interested indeed, and maybe it will get more to the browser, for instance, the VR. Is it possible in the future, etc.? So VR inside the browser, for instance.
VR inside, yeah, that's already very possible. So you can go in your VR headset. There's a browser in there, and there are web apps that you can open in the browser in VR.
Yeah.
And then you can do it. You can develop it as differently, so more like a website, and you can see it in VR. There are also, of course, you can play games in your browser, of course. I know a lot of metaverse applications, they have a mix. You can either play it in VR or in your browser, and you can interact with other people in VR.
So specific applications inside your browser are possible, and front-enders could work on that.
Very much.
No, nice, interesting. Yeah, I want to know it. Thank you.
Nice. There are some rules about the user input. So one of is that if you move your hand in VR, always try to keep the hand where your real hand is. Do not move the hands or the head of the player without any good reason. What we use now is also snapping of the hand. So you have your real hand position and like a ghost hand position. So if you try to go with your hand through a table, your real hand will of course, go through the virtual table. But the virtual hand will stay on top of the table and just slightly press inside the table. And this gives the illusion that you're hitting something while you're not hitting it. It sounds, in the past, they said it's better not to do this, but of course, the technology is changing, and now it's used much more. Just like gaze in the bottom right corner. It's a very old technology that you use for VR headsets without controllers. Is that you have a point in the middle of your screen, in the middle of your eyes. And with that, if you look at something for more than a few seconds, you select it. This was very old. Once we had controllers, you can, of course, use your controls to point and click. But now with eye tracking, it's kind of coming back. So you can, again, use all the technologies are becoming, again, relevant to select things with your eyes. Something to keep in mind while developing is always that you have right-handed and left-handed people. So that's something that we used in one of the simulations. We used only the right hand for a long time until our tester found out that your left hand doesn't actually work. So that was
very accessibility issues.
Yeah, very interesting.
In that case,
something else that you always you want to use standards, which are still very ambiguous in VR. So I know for web, for example, you don't put a logout button in the bottom right corner of your screen. But I think that's bad from there. But so in VR, there are also kind of these rules. So how you use a menu, it's always the same button. If you want to shoot in a virtual game, for example, always use the same buttons for that. We, in our applications, use a lot of hand tracking right now. It takes away a lot of problems with explaining the controllers. Like I said, when you put a headset on someone, they're gone. And then you have to put the controllers in their hands. And well, they don't grab it correctly. So you really have to mangle it in their hands. And once they have it, they keep holding it wrong. And you have to explain what the buttons are, where the buttons are, and what they're used for. Now with hand tracking, everybody knows how their hands work, I assume, hopefully. So it takes a lot of this problem away. Everybody can put it on and they know how it works. What we also do is we use interactions which are real. So we have an application which you open a door, a airplane door. So you grab a handle and you really have to grab it and to turn it all the way, just like a real airplane door. So by keeping it close to reality, it's always, very intuitive in that way. Other things is to look out for is what you show as hands. So a lot of VR games use robot hands or ghost hands, and they do this intentionally because you need to be associated with the hands. So if you don't feel close to the hand because it doesn't look at all like your own hands, it can give a lot of problems, like that you don't think that the hand is yours.
Within Frontend, we of course have like mouse and keyboard that are the most used inputs in that case. Do you foresee maybe that in the future we will not use a mouse and keyboard anymore, and maybe also apply it a bit more in the browser?
Yeah, I think the hand tracking, if VR catches really on, like the whole metaverse and everything, so I think hand tracking will be the main way to go. So Meta, we use the Meta Quest 2 device for our simulations, and they also push out regular updates about how you interact in their own menu. So they have hand tracking now for around 2-3 years, but it's all with pinching. So you have like a laser from the pinching to a UI far away. And now a few months ago, they put the UI very close and you can simply press it. In the past, it was really wonky because the algorithm for tracking your hands was not that well. Now it's really optimized and it feels really natural to press buttons in front of you.
So maybe in the future we need to have like mouse, keyboard, and hand tracking. In that case, that will have a pretty big impact.
Maybe even only hand tracking.
Maybe even only hand
A
tracking.
keyboard will always be there. Even maybe virtual keyboard, but it will probably be there.
Interesting. Nice.
Nice.
Thank you.
So we have some other things that we have to think about. This is more UX than front-end maybe, but where sound comes from. So in the game, sound comes from your speakers. It comes, of course, from a location, but in VR, it really needs to come from the location where the sound comes from. Because otherwise you get really disoriented if something falls in front of you and you hear sound behind you. It can really mess with your mind. Something else that we have to take care about is size. So people have different sizes. I myself am not biggest. I know you're very
Tall.
very tall. So the thing is with traditional game development, you don't need to render the bottom of the table because the user will never see it. You're from on top of the table and you see it like this. But the user in VR, you can look at from every side. You can look at an object. So you really have to take care that the scene you make, the world you make, everything is covered. Because otherwise it can feel really, can take you out of the immersion of your application. We have also some rules about movement. First, don't make the user move too much or very wildly. You still have, of course, controllers in a lot of games. It's still a risk that you hit something with your controller. Even I have the headset on my head like for a few hours at least a day. And even I still sometimes hit my table, I have to admit. But I also have disabled my Guardian, so maybe that's my own fault. Something else is that really take care with if something is fake or real. It's okay if something is fake. It's even okay if it feels really fake, as long as it feels okay. So you don't need to keep the rules of our real world. So if you throw a cup, it doesn't need to fall at exactly the right speed. Maybe even let it hover for a few seconds so the user can grab it back if he wants. It just has to feel okay. Something else we have to take care about is tutorials. In games, you often have a tutorial in which you explain everything to the user. With VR, it's very important that you make the first scene which the user comes in a very calm environment in which you can explore the rules of this new world. So if you have objects that are interactable, make it clear in this first scene which objects those are, and let the player just walk around to see if I am close with my hands to a cup, for example, it gets a highlight, and that way I know I can interact with the cup. And if I get my hand close to a book and it doesn't highlight, I know I cannot interact with the book.
Nice timing.
Very, very nice timing. So that's also something that I bring in almost any presentation I give, is that the player doesn't have to be good. The player has to feel good. Well, it's for games, of course, but simulations, it's the same. During my last internship, I made a generic zombie shooter. So you were with multiple people in virtual reality. There were corners in the room where zombies would come from. And the idea of the game was you shoot them from far away. You get points, different points from where you hit. And at the end of a round, you get a very big screen with your points and the points of your other players. The idea was to be that it was very competitive. So you need to aim very well. There was also like a accuracy of how much you hit and how much you miss, which was very point heavy. We showed this in a like kind of escape room setting. And something that someone asked me was, is it possible to make a laser pointer from the barrel of your gun? Which kind of defeated the purpose of the application. Is everything still hearable?
I hear your PC. Indeed, it's going quite loud, to be honest. I don't know if you have a demo ready or something like that. Because it's turning up, and you're also time-wise, please speed it up a bit.
So, was I? Yeah, so there was this laser pointer, and I implemented it in the game, and everybody actually really liked it. So it defeated the purpose of the game, but because everybody liked it that much, we just kept it in there. I will skip one of the demos then, and I will very quickly show the second part of the demo, for which I need to reshare my screen very, very quickly. I will keep it very, very short. So this is this screen. Is it visible?
Yeah, it's visible.
Okay. So this is Unity. Unity is the game engine we used to make, well, games. And you see here a very small environment with different objects. So this will be kind of like, this is my front end. And this is also the front end of the user, what he will see and what he will experience. So we have here a camera, which shows the scene. And it's very simple to I can move objects around. And every object exists out of 3 elements. One is the mesh, which is the form of an object. The second one is the material. So what is the object made of and what does it look like, the colors, the patterns. And the third one is the shader, and that's the effect on it. So is something wet, is something shiny, is something not shiny. And this is very shortly, well, our front end. I can show very shortly, the floor is made of concrete. I can make it.
So you have different components and you can change.
Yeah, you can interchange everything. You can change materials on every object to make it of a different material. And this is what we use to make our simulations.
Awesome, and I see your laptop likes it because it's going up. You work at KLM, so I think
ready for takeoff.
Ready for takeoff in this case.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you. It's really nice to see some VR. It's something I don't use in my professional work, but I see there's a question from my Mew as well, like with VR and frameworks that are like in the browser. Do you have any recommendations?
I haven't used it that much. Like I said, my background is mostly in backend development, so I come from a C# background. So Unity is a very logical step for me, which is a C# for developing. I know there's like 3GS also, which is a front-end library to develop things in, and which you can immediately also deploy it in the browser. I can look it up, but I don't have any that much. I know that also in Unity you can export to WebGL, and then you can also run it in your browser. But it's of course not browser-based.
But it's able to give it to the users through the browser. That's pretty interesting. Yeah,
for sure.
I'm also interested in, well, we talked already a bit about the future because this is really VR focused in that case. And for the front-end people, it's like, what can they do? How can they learn a bit more about it? Is it possible to incorporate it with, for instance, WebGL or 3.js?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I'm not sure about it. Like I said, front end in VR is almost everything you see. So 3D modeling would already kind of be the direction you can go in as front end. Shader forge, making different shaders, even having, they call it in game development, game design, level design. So where you put the objects to very UX heavy also, from what do you want to what do you want the user to look at? What do you want to grab his attention? And it's very much, well, I think it's going to be 3D very much. If VR catches on very much, if the metaverse catches on, I'm pretty sure that
front end will be
3D. Everything will be 3D.
I think that's a great ending for your talk. Everything will be 3D, everything will be front end. Thank you. We will go to the last session basically, and that's looking ahead. And well, looking ahead also means looking backwards a bit. We did 2 front-end lightning talks this year. This one is about innovation in the front end. So maybe you're not your normal typical front-end lightning talk, but more about speculation and interesting to see like the back to the roots of a remix and also the user interaction with VR. In June, we'll be talking about, well, if you have LinkedIn, you probably get flooded by it, AI, ChatGPT, etc. We will have more of a discussion panel, and we will have probably 2 presentations. We will post a meetup link somewhere next week, so stay tuned for that. After that, we will probably have a security and cloud related subject, front-end architecture as well, and we will do again a DesignX front-end session. If you're thinking, hey, I want to present, I know a cool subject, please come to us and we can give you the opportunity to, well, develop it and come and present at us. Well, we have different formats from the talk show to 2 nice presentations and some inspirational stuff. Well, contact us. Thank you all for being here. I don't think there are any questions left for the users here. For the presenters, not users, my bad. Yeah, we're talking a lot about users these days. So thank you all for being here. Thank you as well. and I will see you next time.